The opening of Season 5 wastes no time in setting a tone of sorrow and suspense. Instead of saving the Last Supper for the finale, the series begins to weave pieces of it throughout the entire season, forcing us to sit with the tension of Jesus' final night from the very beginning. Episode 1 opens with Jesus looking around the table, his face heavy with grief, his words cutting through the noise of the disciples' chatter. He tells them that he is leaving, and though they do not understand, we as viewers do. The room is filled with a silence that feels unbearable as each disciple tries to cling to certainty. John leans forward with devotion, Peter speaks with confidence, and the others echo their agreement. Yet the truth lingers in the air. When the time comes, their boldness will shatter like glass. Their voices declare faith, but their hearts are fragile. And as the camera lingers on Judas, everything changes. His silence is louder than words, his eyes flicker with unease, his lips remain sealed, and his heart trembles with doubts that no one else can see. From this haunting opening, the episode shifts into a scene of triumph that hides tragedy. Jesus enters Jerusalem riding on a donkey, the crowd exploding in celebration. "Hosanna to the Son of David," they cry, their joy echoing through the streets like thunder. The prophecy from Zechariah is unfolding before their eyes, but their vision is clouded. They think they are welcoming a warrior king who will overthrow Rome, not a suffering servant who will die on a cross. The disciples walk beside him, half in awe, half in dread. They know the danger of this moment, even if they do not fully understand its purpose. Zebedee, the father of James and John, voices the fear that so many of them feel. He pulls Jesus aside, his voice sharp with worry. "Do you realize what the people are saying? Do you know what it means when they call you the Son of David?" His fear is not unfounded. He knows the temple leaders are watching. He knows Rome is listening. Every cheer from the crowd is also a cry for blood in the ears of those who feel threatened by Jesus' power. Joseph, another figure often quiet in past seasons, adds his voice of concern. "This is dangerous," he says softly. "Are you ready for this? Are we?" But Jesus is unshaken. His calm is unsettling. His eyes fixed on something beyond the cheers, beyond the fear, beyond the walls of Jerusalem itself. He knows that the same crowd shouting praises will soon demand his death. He knows that the city he enters with peace will reject him with violence. And yet, he does not turn back. His mission is not to claim an earthly throne, but to fulfill the will of God, no matter the cost. This paradox between the joy of the people and the sorrow of Jesus is what makes the scene so powerful. To the crowd, this is a moment of victory. To Jesus, it is the beginning of the end. The episode lingers on this contradiction. We see laughter, songs, and even a wedding along the way, where the joy of life briefly interrupts the march toward death. Yet even here, the whispers rise again. A boy recognizes Jesus, shouts his name, and the crowd echoes with Hosanna. The disciples smile outwardly, but their hearts are heavy. They know what this means. Every cheer brings them closer to the inevitable clash with the temple leaders, closer to betrayal, closer to the cross. And in the middle of it all, Judas watches. His silence, his uncertainty, his conflicted gaze, each detail reminds us that the danger does not only come from outside. It is also seated at the very table of Jesus' closest friends. The first section of this episode makes it clear. The season will not be about comfort or ease. It is about faith in the face of fear, love in the shadow of betrayal, and the clash between what the people expect and what God has planned. The triumphal entry is more than celebration. It is prophecy in motion. And it is only the beginning of a journey that will lead Jesus to his most heartbreaking and most glorious moment. After the weight of the triumphal entry settles, Episode 1 shifts into a deeper exploration of what is happening behind the scenes. The joy of the crowd cannot erase the unease among the disciples, and for the first time, we see their private conversations echoing with fear and doubt. Peter, bold as always, tries to speak with certainty, reassuring the others that everything is unfolding as it should. Yet even in his voice there is a tremor, a sense that he knows the cost of following Jesus is about to be higher than any of them imagined. John is steady but sorrowful, while Thomas struggles to balance his faith with his constant questioning. What makes these moments so striking is that the chosen does not present the disciples as untouchable heroes, but as real men caught in the whirlwind of destiny. Their faith is genuine, but their humanity bleeds through every word, reminding us that their strength will soon collapse under the weight of fear. This tension becomes even clearer when the episode pulls us into a new perspective. Jesus alone, gazing upon the city that both welcomes and rejects him. There is no cheering crowd here, no celebration, only silence as he looks out over Jerusalem from the heights of a wall. His face is marked with sorrow, his eyes heavy with visions of what is to come. In this quiet moment, Jesus laments the city, knowing that its streets will soon be drenched with cries, not of joy, but of judgment. The series does something daring here, showing us not just the triumph of prophecy, but also its cost. Jesus foresees the destruction of the temple, the downfall of Jerusalem, and the suffering that will follow the rejection of God's Son. It is a moment of raw intimacy, stripped of grandeur, a reminder that behind every prophecy lies heartbreak. For the first time this season, the scope of Jesus' mission feels overwhelming, not just for his disciples, but for the fate of the entire nation. The sorrow of this scene is mirrored by other characters as well. Veronica, the woman once healed by Jesus, stands among the people, but sees with different eyes. She does not simply cheer, she weeps, her tears flowing for the blindness of the city. Simon the Zealot's brother, Atticus, is also shown with a heaviness that reflects the sorrow of what is to come. Their grief becomes a subtle chorus to Jesus' lament, a reminder that not everyone is lost in the excitement of the moment. Some sense the storm that is approaching. Their tears echo the truth that most of the city refuses to see, that their Messiah is not here to overthrow Rome, but to confront sin and death itself. And then comes the first true moment of confrontation in the episode, a foreshadowing of the battle that is about to unfold. The temple authorities, already alarmed by the shouts of Son of David, meet in secret, their whispers filled with anger and fear. They speak of blasphemy, of rebellion, of danger to their fragile position under Roman rule. To them, Jesus is not a savior but a threat, one that must be silenced before it grows beyond control. Their words are sharp, their plans already forming, and though they do not act yet, the tension is unmistakable. Every cheer from the crowd is mirrored by the tightening grip of those determined to end Jesus' mission. And in this, we are reminded that the true danger is not the joy of the people, but the hatred of those in power. Through all of this, Judas remains silent. His silence is not emptiness, it is heavy, filled with questions he does not dare voice. He watches as the people cheer, as the disciples wrestle with their doubts, as the authorities whisper in secret. And in his heart, the fracture begins to grow. Judas is not yet the betrayer, but he is no longer fully aligned with the mission of Jesus. He longs for a Messiah who will rise with power, who will overthrow oppression, who will fulfill his vision of a kingdom restored. Yet every step Jesus takes reminds him that this is not the path being walked. The growing gap between Judas's expectations and Jesus's reality is the seed of betrayal, and in episode 1, we begin to see it take root. The weight of this is chilling, because we know where it leads. This entire section of the episode is about contrasts, the joy of the crowd and the sorrow of Jesus, the faith of the disciples and their private fear, the hope of prophecy fulfilled and the warning of judgment to come. The silence of Judas and the whispers of the temple leaders. Every moment is layered, every exchange soaked in meaning. The chosen makes it clear that nothing here is simple triumph. The ride into Jerusalem is not an end. It is a beginning, a march into conflict, betrayal, and sacrifice. As the episode presses forward, we feel the tension tighten, drawing us closer to the breaking point that is destined to come. The story deepens when night falls. The joy of palm branches and cheering crowds fades into shadows, and Jerusalem takes on a different face. The disciples gather in a quiet upper room, their voices lowered, their expressions uneasy. This is no celebration. This is strategy, survival, and fear all mixed together. They speak of what the entry into the city means. Some are excited, believing the people's cheers are proof that the tide is turning in their favor. Others are not convinced, whispering their doubts, wondering if the joy of today will only fuel the wrath of both Rome and the Sanhedrin tomorrow. Matthew, still driven by logic, lays out the risk in detail. Rome will never tolerate such gatherings, and the temple authorities will not stand for a man being called king. Yet, amid the discussion, Jesus is calm, unmoved by either their fear or their excitement. His words are few but heavy, like thunder rolling in the distance. He speaks not of overthrowing enemies, but of what must happen soon, his suffering, his rejection, and his death. His disciples listen, but their eyes show that they cannot fully understand. This is where the tension becomes almost unbearable, because the divide between what Jesus knows and what his followers expect grows larger with every moment. Peter cannot accept it, his pride and loyalty refusing to let the idea of Jesus' death take root. He swears with fire in his eyes that he will never allow harm to come to his master. John listens with sorrow, sensing truth in Jesus' words, but unable to imagine life without him. And Judas, always Judas, remains on the edge of the group, silent, watching, his face a mask of thought and calculation. The silence speaks louder than any words he could utter, and for the audience, it is chilling. We know the history. We know where this silence leads. And yet the chosen forces us to sit with it, to feel the weight of watching a man slowly separate his heart from the truth. The city itself becomes a character in this episode. In the daylight, it was alive with shouts of Hosanna, but under the cover of darkness, whispers creep through the narrow alleys. Priests conspire, Romans prepare, and ordinary families speak in hushed tones about the man called Jesus. Some believe he is the Messiah, others fear he is a fraud, and still more worry that his presence will only invite Rome's wrath. It is a city divided, a city on the edge of eruption. The tension is not only spiritual but political, and the show highlights this with subtle but powerful moments. The temple guards patrol the streets with sharper eyes, the priests send messengers through the night, and the Romans mark every movement, waiting for any sign of rebellion. The stage is being set for a confrontation unlike anything Jerusalem has seen before. As the disciples struggle with Jesus' warnings, another threat emerges: the cost of following him. Mary Magdalene, always steadfast, senses the storm ahead and clings to her faith, but her tears betray her heart. She is not afraid for herself, she is afraid of losing the man who gave her life back. Her devotion is not shaken, but her sorrow shows us the human side of faith, the agony of knowing that obedience often leads to heartbreak. Meanwhile, others in the group whisper of escape. If the authorities come, what then? Do they flee? Do they fight? The questions hang in the air with no answers, only the quiet certainty that the moment of choice is drawing near. The most haunting part of this section comes when Jesus steps away from the group, retreating into solitude. In the silence of the night, he prays, his voice low but filled with emotion. He does not pray for triumph, but for strength, for his disciples, for the city, for the mission that lies ahead. His words reveal the heart of the episode, that the road to victory is paved with suffering, and that salvation will not come through power, but through sacrifice. As he prays, the disciples watch from a distance, unable to fully grasp the weight of what they are witnessing. To them, it is still a mystery. To us, it is the foreshadowing of the cross. By the end of this section, the audience is left with a sense of dread mixed with awe. The chosen does not rush through these moments, but lets them linger, stretching out the silence, forcing us to confront the reality of what is coming. The triumphal entry is behind us, the crucifixion ahead. In this in-between, we sit in the darkness with the disciples, feeling their fear, their confusion, and their fragile hope. And through it all, Judas remains quiet, a shadow within the light, waiting for the moment when his silence will turn into action. The episode presses forward into the next day, and with it comes the clash that everyone has been anticipating. The temple courts, usually a place of order and ritual, erupt in chaos as Jesus steps inside. Merchants and money changers fill the air with shouts, coins clattering across the stone, animals crying out as they are bought and sold. It is the sound of business as usual, but to Jesus, it is the sound of corruption. In one of the most dramatic moments of the season so far, he overturns the tables, scattering the coins across the ground like fallen idols. His voice rises above the commotion, filled with fire and authority. This is meant to be a house of prayer, yet it has been turned into a den of thieves. The disciples, caught between awe and fear, watch as the temple erupts with outrage. The priests are stunned, the merchants furious, and the people shocked. But Jesus does not falter. His righteous anger is a blaze that cannot be quenched, and for the first time in this season, we see a side of him that is both terrifying and holy. This act is more than a cleansing. It is a declaration of war. The priests, humiliated and enraged, retreat to their chambers, their whispers now dripping with venom. This man, they say, must be stopped. It is no longer a question of if, but when. The episode shows their desperation, their fear of losing control, their willingness to conspire with anyone who can help them bring Jesus down. The plotting begins to crystallize here, taking shape like a shadow that grows longer with each passing hour. The Sanhedrin debates, their words sharp and filled with venom, but underneath it all lies a single decision. Jesus cannot leave Jerusalem alive. And though they do not yet know how it will happen, the seeds of betrayal are already beginning to bear fruit. Meanwhile, the disciples feel the weight of this act pressing down on them. For the first time, some openly question whether following Jesus will cost them their lives. Andrew wonders aloud if they will all be arrested. Thomas, ever the voice of reason and doubt, fears the wrath of Rome. Even Peter, bold and brash, begins to sense that the path ahead will not be paved with victory, but with suffering. Their voices rise in tension, each one reflecting the turmoil of hearts that are faithful but afraid. Yet through it all, Jesus remains calm, his gaze fixed not on their fears, but on the mission that lies ahead. His silence after the cleansing is deafening, a quiet reminder that his fight is not with Rome or with merchants, but with sin itself. And then, in the shadows, Judas begins to move. His silence breaks not in words but in actions. The camera of the story lingers on his eyes, his hesitation, his quiet steps away from the group. He is drawn toward the priests, though he does not yet speak to them. The allure of power, the promise of a Messiah who would rise like a king, gnaws at him. In his heart, a fracture widens. He loves his teacher, but he cannot reconcile the Messiah he dreamed of with the man who speaks of death and sacrifice. That inner conflict simmers through the episode, giving every look and every pause a chilling weight. We watch, helpless, as the road to betrayal begins to unfold, one silent step at a time. The crowd itself also shifts in tone. The very voices that cried Hosanna now murmur in confusion. Some are unsettled by Jesus' defiance in the temple. Others whisper that his actions will bring Rome's sword upon them all. The joy of his arrival has begun to sour, replaced by uncertainty. A dangerous question begins to spread among them. Is this truly the Messiah they hoped for, or is he a pretender? It is a question that will soon divide the city, and the tension is almost unbearable. The Chosen does not allow the audience to escape this unease. Instead, it pulls us deeper into it, forcing us to witness the slow unraveling of hope, the turning of a crowd, and the isolation of a man who knows the path before him leads to a cross. By the end of this section, we are no longer watching a celebration, but a countdown. Every table overturned, every whisper of the priests, every glance from Judas is a step closer to the inevitable. The triumph of the entry has already begun to fade, swallowed by the shadows of betrayal and judgment. And though the disciples cling desperately to the belief that victory is near, the audience knows the truth. The storm has only just begun.